It's not anti-feminist to say that in addition to doing everything men can do intellectually, women also have another power, the power of the ultimatum. Getting men to change their destructive ways by threatening to leave them, humiliate them, or cut them off in bed. It's a tale as old as time.
I don't know if you know anything about her, but I mean, this is, yeah. I mean, I want to go through the list of conspiracy theorists, but we thought this would be a good week to get the audience to know her a little better. She's the new groupie in Trump's circle. That's my opinion.
Bill Maher just did what many thought was impossible. He completely roasted Melania Trump and Laura Loomer, and guess what? Donald Trump is speechless. From calling Melania the invisible woman to joking about Trump's future marriage to Loomer, Maher didn't hold back. But here's the real kicker. Instead of letting it slide, Trump's throwing a tantrum and even turning this roast into a public spectacle. So what happens when you poke fun at the world's most controversial family and make them lose their cool?
I hope I inspire little girls everywhere to marry for money. Oh, that's so sweet. Every time I look at my husband, I'm reminded of the Slovenian national dish. a fat, greasy sausage filled with cheese.
His recent takedown of Melania Trump is the perfect example of how he can take uncomfortable truths and turn them into hilarious punchlines. Now, we've all seen the memes, the media stories, and the public speculation about Melania's marriage to Donald Trump. For years, people have wondered what's going on behind closed doors at the Trump Tower. Is she truly happy? Or is she just playing the role of the supportive wife? Well, leave it to Bill Maher to answer that question in his comedic way. When Maher took the stage, he didn't tiptoe around the obvious. Instead, he dove right into the awkward dynamics between Melania and her husband. First up was Melania's modeling career. Now, Maher, being Maher, didn't just say she was a model. He took it a step further. He joked that she once posed for a magazine called Eastern European Brides Monthly. Ouch. But hey, it was funny. It was also a nod to the fact that Melania's career before marrying Donald Trump was largely in the spotlight for her looks, rather than her intellect or personal achievements. It was a subtle dig at the idea that she's been reduced to a trophy wife. But the roast didn't stop there.
25 things you didn't know about Melania. In Slovenia, I was a catalog model, which is what you call a model you order out of a catalog.
One of Maher's biggest zingers came when he suggested that Melania might be holding her breath for long periods, not because she's physically struggling, but because she's trying to endure the awkwardness of being married to Donald Trump. If you've ever watched the two interact in public, you know exactly what Maher is getting at. From the uncomfortable hand swats to the forced smiles, it's almost as if there's an invisible wall between them. Maher's joke wasn't just about their public displays of affection, or lack thereof. It was about the deep-rooted tension that's been visible for years. Now, most people might just laugh at a joke like this and move on, but with Melania, who's known for her near-total silence in public, you can't help but wonder if there's some truth to what Maher is saying. Could she be secretly enjoying these moments of comedic release? Maybe the constant jokes and public speculations about her marriage have become the one place where she can breathe a little easier. After all, the public has been whispering for years about her apparent dissatisfaction. Is she unhappy, or is she just playing the role she's been handed?
A hold of Melania's list. I don't know if you'd like to, but these are her rules. You are not to leave your girdle on the bathroom floor.
In his roast of Melania, Maher imagined a Trump marriage manual filled with absurd rules that only a comedian with insider knowledge could dream up. Now, I know what you're thinking. How bad could it be? But if you've ever seen Donald and Melania interact, you'll know exactly where Maher's coming from. Let's start with the no-touching rule. You might think that's a stretch, but Maher wasn't so far off. Who could forget those awkward moments when Melania swatted Donald's hand away in public? If anything, those moments became one of the most iconic parts of their relationship. Every time it happened, it was like watching a train wreck. You couldn't look away, and you couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable. Maher turned that uncomfortable energy into pure comedy gold. He imagines a scenario where the Trump marriage operates under a strict, no-touching policy, and honestly, it makes sense when you think about it. But the real kicker was Maher's suggestion that Melania might respond to an "I love you" with a cold "you're welcome." I mean, that's brutal, right? But it's also hilarious because it taps into the dynamic we've all seen play out in front of the cameras. How many times have we watched Donald Trump try to touch Melania's hand, only for her to recoil like she's afraid he might pass on some of his bad energy? Maher wasn't just poking fun at their public interactions. He was taking the public's perception of their marriage and turning it into a satirical commentary on what it's actually like behind the scenes.
You are not to ask for hand. You are not allowed to eat Wendy's in bed. Tell Wendy I can hear her. You are not to ever again mention the bride catalog's return policy.
Maher didn't stop there. He also painted a picture of what their private life might look like, suggesting that the Trump marriage manual could include a set of absurd rules that reflect the bizarre dynamics we've seen over the years. Maybe they have a rule about not leaving girdles on the bathroom floor, which Maher jokingly claimed was considered basic courtesy in the Trump world. It's the kind of humor that isn't just funny, it's sharp and insightful. Maher knows exactly how to use humor to point out the ridiculousness of the Trump family's image. But what's even more interesting is that Maher isn't just making up these absurd rules out of thin air. They're a reflection of the awkwardness we've all witnessed between Donald and Melania over the years. We've seen it in interviews, at rallies, and even in social media posts. The coldness, the forced smiles, and the uncomfortable handshakes. Maher's roast may be exaggerated for comedic effect, but it's rooted in real public perception. The Trumps have always been about maintaining an image, even if that image doesn't reflect the reality of their personal lives. Maher just stripped away the glossy surface and exposed the awkwardness that's been simmering beneath the surface.
Maybe it falls to you now, Melania. You can end this reign of terror, and all you have to do is channel your inner Taylor Swift and walk out the door. You know you wanna. Your unhappiness is obvious. You despise his creepy little monkey fingers touching your hand.
One of the most memorable moments came when Maher aimed her Secret Service codename, Muse. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what a codename is, it's essentially a nickname given to public figures for security purposes, but instead of just leaving it at Muse, Maher decided to dig a little deeper. For those unfamiliar with the term, a muse is typically someone who inspires art, creativity, and innovation. Essentially, someone who sparks greatness. Let's be honest though, calling Melania Muse feels a little out of place. It's a bit of a stretch, right? Most of us know her for her stoic demeanor, awkward public appearances, and overall air of detachment from the political circus around her.
First Lady Melania Trump appears to swat away the president's outreached hand when they arrived in Israel Monday. Here it is again, close up.
So Maher did what any comedian would do. He took that absurdity and turned it into a roast. Instead of letting the name Muse slide by as something dignified and flattering, Maher put his spin on it. He suggested that Melania's true codename should be the Invisible Woman. Ouch, right? But as harsh as that might sound, it hit the mark. The joke wasn't just a random jab, it spoke to the way the public often views Melania. She's the first lady who, while always present by Donald's side in public appearances, seems almost invisible in terms of her personality or engagement. The public knows her mostly for her stiff expressions, moments of awkwardness, and the way she tends to recede into the background when the cameras are on. It's like she's mastered the art of being seen without ever really being noticed.
So kick him to the curb. Slap away that hand for good. No more public embarrassment. No more porn stars. No more stealing your makeup. Toss his boxy clown suits on the front lawn. Just tell him, I'm leaving you and I'm taking our child. He would be stunned. We have a child?
And honestly, the crowd loved it. The joke landed because it resonated with the reality that many of us have observed over the years. How many times have we seen Melania standing beside her husband, clearly uncomfortable yet never saying much? It's almost as if she's more a bystander in her marriage than an active participant. While some might see this as a defense mechanism or a way to protect her privacy, Maher turned it into a hilarious, albeit harsh, commentary on how the public perceives her. The idea of Melania being the muse behind the Trump dynasty was, in Maher's words, laughable. It's not that she hasn't been an essential part of the family's public image, but the idea of her being an inspiring figure in the traditional sense, that just doesn't quite match up with the way she presents herself.
The thing that got an enormous amount of media attention had to do with Melania Trump, the First Lady, and some video. Was this an actual slap, or did she just pull her hand away? She pulled her hand away, but I didn't quite see the contact of a slap.
But the real genius of Maher's roast wasn't just the jab at Melania herself. It was how he used humor to shine a light on the contradiction between the public image of the Trump family and the reality. We've all seen Melania smile politely in front of cameras, stand next to Donald during rallies, and even give the occasional speech. But through it all, her persona has always been more about what she doesn't say than what she does. And Maher's suggestion that her new code name should be the Invisible Woman plays off of that perfectly. It's a clever way to call out the fact that despite her very public role as the First Lady, she often seems more like an accessory than an active participant in the political and social discourse surrounding her husband's presidency.
When does America ever turn down seconds? I mean, come on. Look, this is just the facts.
You knew it was coming. After Bill Maher delivered his expertly timed roast of Melania Trump, there was no way that Donald wasn't going to respond. The man has built a career on throwing insults left and right, but let's be honest, he's not exactly the best sport when the tables are turned. Maher's jokes about Melania were no exception. As soon as the roast hit, it wasn't long before Trump started throwing a tantrum that would have made any toddler jealous.
He shot out of his chair. He said to his lawyers, "Do something. What do you think I'm not paying you for?"
We've seen Trump react to criticism in the past, whether it's through a series of inflammatory tweets or a dramatic outburst on social media. This time, he didn't disappoint. He took Maher's comedy straight to heart and turned it into a public spectacle. Trump's ego, as we all know, is as big as his business empire. When Maher joked about Trump's family, it's no surprise he didn't stay quiet. But instead of silencing the jokes, Trump's meltdown only made them louder and brought even more attention. It's almost as if Trump handed Maher a microphone and said, "Here, take your jokes louder." The more Trump raged about the roast, the more people paid attention to it. The more he tried to shut down the joke, the more it spread like wildfire. It's a classic case of what happens when you try to suppress something. It only grows stronger. People were talking about the jokes everywhere. Social media was buzzing, news outlets were reporting, and suddenly, Bill Maher's roast of Melania was everywhere. The very thing Trump tried to shut down had just gone viral thanks to his over-the-top reaction.
The coverage of your wife, Melania. New York Times profile says her Twitter feed reflects a seemingly isolated life of beauty rituals, private jet rides, and bikini body. And if she wasn't married to you, says the Times, her life might resemble that of any number of trophy spouses in New York, Palm Beach, and Paris. How do you feel about that?
Well, she's a great woman. She's got a tremendous heart, a great outer beauty, but a great inner beauty. She's been on the cover of Vogue. She was a very, very successful model. She did really well before she met me. And
was that article unfair?
Trump's inability to take a joke has become something of a spectacle in itself. He's made a career of insulting others, but when the tables are turned, he crumbles faster than a house of cards. It's a fascinating thing to watch, especially when you consider how much he prides himself on his ability to dish it out. For someone who's been so used to being the one doing the insult, it's almost amusing to see how fragile his ego is. Instead of laughing it off, he lets the jokes eat away at him. And the best part? The more he reacts, the more it fuels the fire. It's like a never-ending cycle. Trump insults, comedians make fun of him, and he reacts so dramatically that it just keeps going in a loop.
With a list of conspiracy theorists, but we thought this would be a good week to get the audience to know her a little better. She's the new groupie in Trump's circle. That's my opinion.
When it comes to Bill Maher, you can expect him to take shots at just about anyone. And in his latest comedy routine, he didn't just stop with Melania Trump. No, he went after Laura Loomer as well. If you don't know who she is, let me give you a quick rundown. Loomer is a controversial right-wing activist who has gained attention for her outspoken, often over-the-top opinions. And let's just say she's no stranger to controversy. She's built a reputation for spreading conspiracy theories and making bold, provocative statements that often spark heated debates. So, when Bill Maher decided to make a joke about her, well, you could almost feel the political earthquake shaking the internet.
You can always tell when it's going south, when the ship is sinking. It's because the person like Trump, the nut at the center of it, starts surrounding himself with, he normally surrounds himself with pretty crazy people, but this Laura Loomer.
The joke itself wasn't anything earth-shattering. Maher casually suggested that maybe, just maybe, Donald Trump might one day marry Loomer. Now, when I heard it, I thought it was a harmless, offhand joke. Bill Maher has a history of poking fun at politicians, celebrities, and anyone willing to put themselves in the public eye. And this was just another target in the endless game of political comedy. But, as you can probably guess, the mega crowd did not take kindly to this little jab. No sooner had the joke left Maher's mouth than social media exploded. People were fuming, and suddenly, Loomer herself was threatening to take action. It didn't take long for Loomer to jump into the fray with her trademark fiery passion. Instead of brushing off the joke, as most people would do, she went full throttle with her reaction. Loomer threatened to sue Maher for a staggering $150 million in damages. Yes, you read that right. $150 million for a joke. Loomer turned a harmless jab into a spectacle, doubling down and making it far more dramatic than necessary. Her overreaction only fueled the fire, turning the joke into a full-blown outrage campaign for the MAGA crowd.
They don't know what it's like to be me. My life is ruined.
Now, you might be wondering, why take it so seriously? It's a valid question. After all, comedy is supposed to be fun, right? We're talking about a comedian making a lighthearted comment, not a personal attack. But in today's political climate, things aren't always so simple. Loomer's reaction highlights a broader issue we've seen in recent years, the increasing tendency to turn comedy into a battleground. Political correctness has become so prevalent that even a small joke can be seen as an attack, leading to legal threats and public outrage. It's almost as if some people are forgetting that humor, especially in the world of political satire, is often meant to push boundaries and expose uncomfortable truths.
People think I'm all in on Trump, but some of the voices in my head like Jill Stein.
But Loomer's response wasn't just an overreaction. It sparked an even bigger conversation about the state of comedy today. Are we entering an era where comedians are going to have to think twice before making a joke for fear of facing legal consequences? Should every little jab be treated like a serious violation? Experts who weighed in on the situation quickly pointed out that Loomer's lawsuit likely wouldn't go anywhere, referencing past cases like when comedian Sarah Silverman was sued for making a joke about a conservative figure. The courts have often sided with free speech, which is a cornerstone of the First Amendment, but that didn't stop the conversation from growing louder. Loomer's lawsuit was like a match tossed onto dry tinder, sparking a larger debate about the fragility of free speech in today's hyper-politicized world.
I want to know what people are actually going to do. My life is ruined. Does anybody understand how ruined my life is? I'm sick of it. I don't want to listen to people tell me that I'm a conspiracy theorist. They don't know what it's like to be me. My life is ruined.
As absurd as the lawsuit may seem, it does serve as a reminder of how easily things can spiral out of control when humor meets the political spotlight. It's as if comedians now have to walk a fine line between making a joke and facing a backlash that could cost them dearly. The political landscape has shifted in a way that makes every comment, even those intended for laughs, feel like a landmine. It's an unsettling thought for anyone who loves comedy, and it raises an important question. How much longer can comedians continue to joke freely without worrying about the potential fallout?
Meantime, the Trump campaign is facing growing questions about a woman who's been showing up a lot around the former president, conservative activist Laura Loomer. She's been called a fringe conspiracy theorist after calling 9/11 an inside job, but Trump says he wants to keep her around. He posted on Truth Social that she doesn't work for the campaign. She's a private citizen and longtime supporter. I disagree with the statements she's made. Like the millions of people who support me, she is tired of watching the radical left Marxists and fascists violently attack and smear me.
Laura Loomer's dramatic response to Bill Maher's harmless joke, a suggestion that Trump might marry her someday, turned into a legal spectacle that has everyone talking. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. Loomer didn't just shrug off the joke, as most of us would have expected. Instead, she went straight for the courts, demanding an eye-popping $150 million in damages. Yes, $150 million for a joke. Now, that's what I call a serious overreaction, don't you think?
Of mine, just like a lot of people are supporters, and she's been a supporter of mine. She speaks very positively of the campaign. I'm not sure why you asked that question, but Laura is a supporter.
You might be sitting there scratching your head, wondering, how in the world does a comedian's joke turn into a $150 million lawsuit? And that's a fair question. After all, we live in a world where comedians routinely make fun of politicians, celebrities, and anyone willing to step into the public spotlight. But instead of rolling with the punch, Loomer took it personally and saw the joke as something much more harmful than it was intended to be. To her, it seemed like the ultimate insult, and as you'd expect, her reaction turned the whole situation into a political firestorm.
A person like Trump, then not at the center of it, starts surrounding himself with, I mean, he normally surrounds himself with pretty crazy people, but this Laura Loomer, I don't know if you know anything about her, but I mean, this is, yeah, I mean, I want to go through the list of conspiracy theorists, but we thought this would be a good week to get the audience to know her a little better. She's the new groupie in Trump's circle.
But here's the thing. Loomer's lawsuit raised an interesting question that's been floating around for some time now. What happens when comedy, which is supposed to be an outlet for pushing boundaries and having a laugh, collides with the world of politics? Is humor still protected by the First Amendment? Or have we entered an era where comedians need to watch their every word for fear of offending someone so deeply that they might end up in court? Loomer's lawsuit, while certainly ridiculous, is part of a larger conversation about the fragility of free speech in our increasingly polarized world. Now, legal experts have weighed in on this, and most agree that Loomer's lawsuit is unlikely to go anywhere. They pointed to past cases like when comedian Sarah Silverman was sued for making a joke about a conservative figure, and the courts ultimately sided with her right to free speech. The legal precedent seems pretty clear. Comedians have the right to make jokes, even if those jokes are about sensitive subjects or public figures. But that doesn't stop the conversation from growing more intense. Loomer's lawsuit might be laughable, but it's also a symbol of the growing trend of people turning to the courts instead of just laughing off a joke.
For example, my spirit animal was eaten by Haitians. My biggest fear is immigrants taking my job as a right-wing hate-monger.
What Loomer's actions highlight is the increasingly contentious relationship between humor and politics. It's as if every joke is now a potential battlefield. Comedians have to navigate a world where jokes that would have been laughed off a few years ago are now met with threats of lawsuits and public outrage. It's a world where a simple punchline can be turned into a legal issue, and that's a frightening prospect for anyone who values the right to joke freely.
As a child, I had 2 of my Bratz dolls deported. I don't hate all brown people, just the brown ones.
At the heart of this debate is the question of whether humor should be policed, and if so, to what extent. While the lawsuit may ultimately fizzle out, Loomer's reaction serves as a reminder of how sensitive the political landscape has become. In a world where everyone is walking on eggshells, it's harder for comedians to make their mark without worrying about the backlash that might follow. And that's the real issue here. We're witnessing a shift where humor is no longer just about getting a laugh, it's about walking a fine line between satire and offense. So, while Loomer's lawsuit might seem like an overblown reaction to a harmless joke, it's also a symptom of a larger problem. And as absurd as it is, the case is forcing us to think about the future of comedy in an increasingly polarized society. Will comedians be able to continue pushing boundaries, or will they be forced to hold back in fear of legal consequences? Time will tell, but for now, it seems that comedy and politics are more intertwined than ever before. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.